All right, everyone. Bruchim habayim. Welcome. We are now live. Everything that you say will now be shared with the rest of the entire world who watches these videos and listens to the recordings. This is great to see such an amazing crowd. We'll start off again by thanking our generous sponsors, the Amalek family, who have sponsored tonight's shiur and sushi and delicious little treats in memory of Miriam Bat Presiada, Zichrona Ibracha, whose nachala was yesterday. The words of Torah, hizuk, the inspiration, the lessons, what we walk out of here with. Amen. We spoke last week about Parashat Tazria, the importance of using a lashon tova, speaking good words. Of course, we're still in Parashat Metzorah, which has to do, of course, with the mitzvah of tzarat, which comes about as a result of lashon hara. But I'm not going to focus on that. I'm going to focus on Inyanei de Yomat. We are 1 week away. 1 week away. You're thinking about that now, right? 1 week away from Leila Seder, the night of Pesach, one of the holiest nights of the year, no question. A night that many people look forward to, and it is filled with tremendous segulot and tremendous kohot. So today we're going to talk about Pesach, since we're 1 week away. I want to open with the Midrash. The Midrash is found in Parashat, in Midrash Rabbah of Megillat Ruth. And the Midrash is expounding on a pasuk in Tehillim where David HaMelech says, Chatzot laila akum lehodot lach. At midnight I arise to thank you. Al mishpetei tzidkecha. Why do I thank you? For your righteous judgments. So the Midrash says, Al mishpetei tzidkecha. What does it mean, righteous judgments? Mishpatim sheheveta ala mitzrim. The judgments that you, God, brought unto Egypt. Utzedakot asher asita im avotenu b'Mitzrayim. And the righteousness that you at the same time simultaneously did for their forefathers in Egypt. What was that righteousness? What was that chesed that Hashem did? Shelo hayu beyadam mitzvot leita'asok bahem veigalu. The Jewish people in Mitzrayim did not have any mitzvot in their bank account to occupy themselves with, any opportunities for mitzvot in order that they could be redeemed. It seemed like they were stuck. And on the night of Yet Mitzrayim, you gave them, David HaMelech saying, you gave them 2 commandments that they could do so that they could be redeemed. And what are those commandments? Dam Pesach ve'dam Milah. The blood of the Korban Pesach, of course, that they were going to paint on their doorposts and on their lintels. And Dam Milah, and the blood of the circumcision. Amar Rabbi Levi says, Nit'arev Dam HaPesach im Dam HaMilah. On that night, the blood of the Pesach offering mingled together with the blood of the circumcision. Shene'emar, as the Pasuk says, Va'evor alayich va'erech mitboseset bedamayich. That I passed you and saw you wallowing in your bloods. Va'omar lach bedamayich hayi. Va'omar lach bedamayich hayi. In your blood you shall live. I said to you, in your blood you shall live. I said to you. And we actually quote these psukim out of Brit Milah. The 2 times he said those words, in your blood you shall live, in references to the 2 bloods, the Dam HaPesach and the Dam HaMilah. This is the Midrash. Harav Achida, Rabbi Chaim Yosef David Azulai, he asks a question. Why is it specifically these 2 mitzvot that Hashem gave Bnei Israel on the night of Pesach to allow them to be redeemed or be worthy of redeeming? Why couldn't he give them some easier mitzvot? For example, there's a mitzvah of shiluach haken, of shooing away the mother bird. Okay, can you imagine? Just find a bird in a tree, sitting on its eggs, shoo it away, grab the eggs, done. No pain. Don't have to worry about slaughtering an Egyptian god. What about tzedakah? Another good option. Just reach in your pocket, whatever you have, find a poor person, give some money to the poor person. Matanot le'evyonim. such an important mitzvah. Also, give me mitzvot, something like that. Why specifically these two? The Midrash elsewhere writes that when HaKadosh Baruch Hu told Moshe to slaughter the Korban Pesach, Moshe Rabbeinu responded to him in wonder. And he said, God, how can I do this? The God of the Egyptians is a lamb. Everybody knows that. Do you really think that we can just go and slaughter the lamb, the sheep, in front of the Egyptians, right in front of their eyes, and they're not going to stone us? So what did Hashem say? Chayecha, by your life. En Yisrael yotzin mikan ad sheyishchatu et Elohem Mitzrayim le'enehem. You're not leaving here until you slaughter that their God in front of them. She'odia lahem she'en Elohem klum. So that they should know that their God is worthless, has no value. So on this is the Midrash. So the Chida asks, if HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to shochet the Korban Pesach, why exactly is Moshe Rabbeinu scared? How is this sakanat nefashot? You have a commandment from God. God is telling you to do something. Go slaughter the Korban Pesach. Why is Moshe even worried? And what's this idea? And in addition to that, the fact that he's a shluchei mitzvah, she's a shaliach mitzvah, Moshe Rabbeinu is being sent as a messenger to go and perform this mitzvah and have everybody perform this mitzvah. There's a rule. When you are sent as a messenger to perform a mitzvah, eno nizokin, you cannot be damaged. You're on the way to do something holy. Hashem is going to protect you. So what exactly is Moshe worried about over here? So the Chida says, he says that rule of not harming, not being harmed or putting yourself in danger is only when the danger is not relevant. But if you are in a situation, if someone tells you, I want you to go buy me matzah for Pesach, okay? But in order to drive matzah, you have to swim across the Niagara Falls, okay? So a person can't say, you know what? I'm going to swim across the Niagara Falls because it's a mitzvah. I'm doing a mitzvah for nothing bad is going to happen. No. When the nezek, when the possibility of damage, of danger is high or very relevant, then it doesn't apply. There's actually a proof to this. In Sefer Shemuel, HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells Shmuel HaNavi to go and anoint David HaMelech as king, even though Shaul was already king, but he got the instruction to anoint David. And Shmuel HaNavi says, Ech elech v'shama Shaul v'aragani. How can I go? If I go, Shaul's going to find out he's going to kill me. So now, Shmuel HaNavi was Shmuel HaNavi. Was he defying God's command? He's just worried. He's worried that even you sending me, God, I'm harmed. I could get harmed by Shaul. I don't have this protection when the sakana is surrounding me. So therefore, that was Moshe's question. Moshe Rabbeinu is saying, you're commanding me to go and slaughter this lamb, everyone to slaughter this lamb. We're living in a country where the lamb is the God. Doing that is literally suicide. We have no chance of surviving. They're uskalunu. They're going to stone us. And this is not a mitzvah yareg val yavor. This is not one of those three mitzvot where I have to go and perform. I have to give my life up and not transgress. So how can I perform this mitzvah? So therefore, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says the following. He says, you have to understand something, Moshe. If you want to get out of here, if your people want to leave this land, you need to do something that is me'al hateva. You need to do something that is beyond nature. In order to be zocheh, to merit something beyond nature, you need to do something on your own. You have to give a part of your soul. So therefore, Hashem gives them two mitzvot. One of them is to take the actual God of the Egyptians and slaughter it in front of them, risk their lives, and say, look at me, I'm going to kill your God right in front of you. And the second mitzvah is dam milah, is the brit milah, which is Mesirut Nefesh, a person who gives himself a brit milah. This is not at 8 days old, my friends. This is giving yourself a brit milah as adults. Most of them are adults. For the first 3 days, you cannot met. You can't even move. You're in so much pain. But Hashem says, Tamulu tatzvechem. You're going to give yourself a brit milah. You're going to sit in a bed for 3 days, unable to move, because this is what needs to be done if you want to leave. If you want to experience the ge'ulah, which is something me'al hateva, something that is so difficult because for so many years you were literally locked in here, Not one person left Mitzrayim in centuries. If you want that to happen, you need to give something beyond tzedakah, beyond sending away a mother bird. It has to be slaughtering their God in front of them. It has to be performing a brit milah for yourself and experiencing that pain. It's Mesirut Nefesh. And that's how this nation is going to get out of here. This idea, this yesod, is that a person who gives of himself, Mesirut Nefesh, for the sake of Kiddush Hashem, we actually find in the Gemara in Masechet Brachot. The Gemara Masechet Brachot, Rav Papa asks Abaye a question that is asked by many, many individuals even today. And the question is, why is it that in previous generations, they were witness to such incredible open miracles, such as water turning into blood, the splitting of the sea, Techiyat HaMetim, and we don't get to see that. Now, this was a question 2,000 years ago. Certainly, maybe today, although we can definitely, I said this morning, what happened on Shabbat, 300 and something missiles flying over into Eretz Israel and not one having any effect, that was the biggest open miracle you're ever going to see. And if you don't understand or if you don't believe that, then you got to come to more shiurim. But that is an open miracle. But this was a good question Rav Papa is asking Abaye. And he gives an example. He says, in the older generation, when they needed rain, Rav Yehuda would go outside. He would just take off his shoe, experience a little bit of discomfort, and immediately rain would start falling in the land. And we are here, we need rain, we're praying, we're fasting for days and nothing's happening. So that's one of the examples that he gave. So Abaye hears the question, and he says, you want to know why? Let me tell you why in our generation, we don't experience these miracles. Because that generation before us gave of themselves al Kiddush Hashem, and we don't do so. We are not willing to give of ourselves, but they are. And he gives an example. In the older generation, there was a man named Rav Ada Bar Ahava. And he once was walking on the street, and he saw a woman who was wearing some clothing. It's a little controversial Gemara. Maybe we could talk about it another time. But he saw a woman wearing some clothing that was not sanua. It was not so modest. And he went up to this woman, and he ripped the clothing right off of her. He goes, how dare you, how dare you wear something like this? Now, I'm assuming he didn't look, he just ripped it out of anger, A few moments later, he finds out that this woman was not even Jewish. So didn't have halachot of tzniut. She wasn't even Jewish. So he felt so bad. He went back, he found the lady, gave her 400 zuz. That was a lot of money back then. 400 zuz to pay her back for the humiliation and of course the dress. Again, I'm not going to get into what he did at that moment, but you see what people were willing to do to stand up for the words of Hashem, taking off your shoe and rain falling. One of the mitzvot that we have in the Torah, which is often quoted by our Chachamim as one of the most important mitzvot that we have, is the mitzvah of kedoshim tiyu, the mitzvah to be holy. It's a very, very complex subject. What does it mean to be holy? So most of the mefarshim, if you open up Parashat Kedoshim, will tell you, to be holy means a form of separation, of hevdel. On a very simple level, Rashi says it's separation from the arayot, from being with men or women that you're not allowed to be with. That is how a person attains holiness. But the Sifrei Hasidut explain that holiness is not just that, but separating from any form of physical or material pleasures that we might have. And on that, there's different levels. There's some people that really, really love food and meats and wines. And although there are certain times to enjoy those meats and those wines, but there's a limit. And if a person separates himself from the beautiful juicy steak and the delicious wine or good scotch that he has, that's a level of kedusha. It's a level of kedusha. And if a person wants to go beyond that and limit himself from much of the food intake that he has, because it's something physical, that's even a higher level kedusha. And that's why it's no surprise to many of us in this room that the Baba Salis and all the great the tzaddikim of the previous generation, they barely ate. It's not because, listen, there was an effect on their body, no question. They were frail, they were weak, they were strong in Torah, but they barely ate. Why is it? Because to them, Kedusha was limiting my physical. I'm going to eat enough to survive. That's basically it. And then after that, that's pleasure. And that's the life that they lived. HaKadosh Baruch Hu ran his world the same way. And when he created the world runs on teva. The world runs naturally. People need to eat to survive. And if a person was to do simply what run the world in a natural way and eat when he needs to eat, then HaKadosh Baruch Hu will act with them similarly. But if a person goes beyond the letter of the law, if a person now acts in a higher level of Kedusha, then you have to believe, and we do believe, that from above, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to do things for us that we don't expect, that are even greater than what is considered the norm. And that's what we see. The Sfarim write, if you, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, if you make yourself holy, then you know, Ki kadosh ani Hashem lokechem, the pasuk, and you should know I'm also holy. What, I don't know that God's holy? Of course I know God's holy. Meaning I'm going to repay to you. I'm going to show you things. I'm going to show you miracles. I'm going to give you blessings that you never in a million years would have expected because of what you were able to give from yourself. One of the most prime examples of this that we have is Yitzchak Avinu. We're going to get to Yitzchak later on in the class. But Yitzchak Avinu and his wife Rivka, they couldn't have children for many, many years. And the Torah tells us, "Vayetar Yitzchak ladonai lenochach ishto ki akarahi," that Yitzchak went to pray opposite his wife, ki akarahi, because she was barren. Vayatel lo Hashem vatar Rivka ishto. And then Kadosh Baruch Hu listened to the prayer of Yitzchak, and Rivka conceived. Now, Yonatan ben Uziel, who is one of the most incredible, deep commentators on all of Tanakh, he says something amazing. Va'azal Yitzchak latavar pulchana atar dekafte avuhi. Where did Yitzchak go to pray? He says Yitzchak went to pray in the place of the Akedah, the place where his father Abraham brought him to be slaughtered. And it was there where he prayed because that was the place where HaKadosh Baruch Hu made a miracle for him and changed his being, we're going to see this later, from a person who was unable to bear children to a person who could bear children, to a man who could bear children. Question is what? Why did Yitzchak Avinu have to go there? Yitzchak Avinu's house probably was the most religious house in the entire world at the time. Okay? He could have went to the shul across the street. He could have sat in a kollel. He could have said the Tehillim of Yitzchak Avinu were probably, no one can match that Tehillim. Why do you have to go all the way back to the place, Ara Moriah, where he was? And the answer is because he needed to transform himself from a male who could not produce a child to a male who could produce a child. And therefore, if he's asking for such a miracle, if he's asking for God to perform something that is beyond nature, me'ala teva, I have to go to the place where I gave myself, where I gave a Mesirut Nefesh, where Hashem did something for me as well. And therefore, I'm going back to Hara Moriah. Says Rav Achida, and he quotes the Rav Moshe Al-Shich. He says there are 248 mitzvot, positive mitzvot in the Torah, corresponding to the 248 limbs that we have. And we have 365 negative mitzvot in the Torah, corresponding to the 365 sinews that we have. If a person were to, God forbid, transgress one of the positive mitzvot or not perform one of the positive mitzvot, you should know that he's pogea one of his limbs. One of his limbs is affected by it. You may not see it or feel it, but you should know that there's something is going to happen to one of those limbs, either something physical or later on in life. You're pogea. 248 limbs. And the same thing, if you are an oved alot ta'aseh, if you transgress a negative commandment, you should know that one of your sinews, one of your gidim is going to be affected as well. Rav Al-Shich says, if a person, God forbid, transgresses avodah zarah, which is the worst of all the averot, mikaf regel ve'adros, his entire body is affected. He's not the same person. You think you look the same, you look in the mirror after you worshipped idols, you think you're the same guy, you're not the same guy. And it's very, very scary. Everything inside of you is tameh. And it's almost impossible to get yourself out of this. But then he says, if a person engages in an act of Kiddush Hashem, if a person engages in an act of Mesirut Nefesh, of giving a part of himself for the sake of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, his entire body is nitkan. With a snap of a finger, everything goes back. And therefore, ladies and gentlemen, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us two mitzvot on this night of Pesach that required Mesirut Nefesh. Because through those two mitzvot of Dam Pesach and Dam Milah, we were able to uproot any inkling of Avodah Zarah or Tum'ah that was there amongst the Jewish people. As we know, you've heard many, many times, the Jewish people were on the 49th level of Tum'ah. One more level, and they would have never been able to get out. But with those two mitzvot, of course, we needed to get to Har Sinai, and that's why we have 49 days of the Omer, but that was enough to push them through. It was enough to make them into a new person, into a new entity from those two mitzvot. There was once a Rav who went to go visit a patient who was suffering from leukemia. And he was in the process of getting bone marrow infusion, blood infusion. So he went, before he got the bone marrow infusion, he went to go visit him. He scanned the guy, it's almost ki'ilu, he had like no will to live. He was just out of it completely because he had no immune system. Everything was just destroyed from the chemo. It was mamash a pain to see. But then he recalls that once he was given the blood infusion and the bone marrow started taking effect, all of a sudden this person changes into like a new human being. And it does have that effect. That's why they wait for bone marrow. Right? That's why it's so important, right? And the Rav says, he goes, this is exactly what happened on that night. You have a nation that is spiritually depleted. They have nothing going for them. It's been so many years, centuries, watching generation after generation come and go. How many Jews are buried in Egypt from thousands of years because they died during these horrible years of affliction and slavery? He says, never going to end. They're at level 0. And then all of a sudden they get this injection of two mitzvot, of Dam Milah and Dam Pesach. And of course, the first reaction is going to be, what do you want me to do? You want me to go and slaughter their God in front of them? How is this going to help my cause? You want me to circumcise myself? How is that going to make me stronger or even a chance to fight? You're telling me we're going to leave soon? This is how we're going to leave? With what koach? With what force? Davka, I'm now made weak. And Hashem says, it's exactly how you're going to leave. And in fact, you're not going to leave until you slaughter them and until you give yourself a brit milah. You know why? Because we're going to start you from scratch. We're going to renew you into a different person. You're going to be mitchadesh right here in front of us. And if the truth is, all of Yetziat Mitzrayim, everything that took place, and all the miracles that happened in this story is based on this yesod, on this idea. In the second plague, the plague of frogs, which is the one that everyone loves to talk about, especially the kids, frogs. Everyone got their little frogs on the table. Okay, everyone likes to talk about the tzefardea. HaKadosh Baruch Hu didn't tell where the frogs to go. The pasuk says, "Vata'ala tzefardea." The frog came up. Of course, Rashi says one big frog, and he started hitting them, and then more frogs went out. And the frogs kind of went all over the place. And every frog decided what was going to be their destination. Hashem says to Moshe, "V'sharatz hayor tzefardeim." You should know that the river is going to be swarmed with frogs. Ve'alu ba'u bebetecha, and they're going to go up to people's homes, ubahadar mishkavecha, and into their bedrooms, ve'al mitatecha, and in their beds, ubebet avadecha uvamecha, uvtanurecha, and in their ovens, uvmisharotecha, and even in their kneading bowls, where you're making the matbucha. That's where they're going. That's where the frogs are going to be. The kol makom, in every single place. Which means that some frogs went into ovens to die. When you enter an oven, you're not coming out alive. Because a frog doesn't know what happens when you enter an oven. But says the Baal HaTurim, a miracle happened. He says, even though the frogs that went into the kneading bowls and into the swamps and into the rivers and into the died, the ones that went into the ovens did not die. Those ones did not die. They went out and they survived. Why is this? Why did that happen? HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, you're willing to give up your life. You're willing to die for my sake, to perform, to help me perform this miracle. Of course, HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't need help by anyone, but still, you're that medium to make this happen. I'm starting you off again. You're going to go back from the beginning. You got a new life, Mr. Frog, that entered the oven. You gave you the Mesirut Nefesh. And we see this by the famous Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, who gave their lives al Kiddush Hashem by jumping into the Kibshana Esh. Where did they get this idea? Where did they get this idea to defy the Romans and say, I'm going to die. I'm going to jump into a furnace. So the Gemara Masechet Pesachim says, they got it from the frogs. They learned it from the frogs. And they said, if the frogs are not commanded to perform the will of God, they're not commanded to perform Kiddush Hashem and sanctify God's name, and yet the Torah says, they will go in your house, you ever ask yourself why he mentions the kneading bowls? Why does he mention the kneading bowls? So he says, when are kneading bowls next to an oven? It must be that you're about to bake something. That means the oven is hot. That's the proof that the oven was hot. Because otherwise, why is there a kneading bowl next to your oven? So it must be that they entered hot ovens. So if the frogs are going in there, al kiddush Hashem, anachnu alachat kama vekama, then for us who are obligated and commanded to sanctify Hashem's name, then certainly we should go. The Midrash Shir Hashirim writes that Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah went to the Navi. His name was Yechezkel. And he asked him, should we give up our lives or no? And Yechezkel said, no. Yechezkel says, you still have a chance to save yourself. Go run away. Go run away. Go somewhere. They did not listen to his advice, and they decided to jump into the furnace. And what happened? They survived. They survived. They came out unscathed, as we are taught. Now the Gemara Masechet Sanhedrin says, at that moment that they jumped into the furnace, HaKadosh Baruch Hu goes to Yechezkel Hanavi, and he says, I want you to go to a place called Bik'at Dura, because there are some people there that died. And I want you to go and revive them. You are going to perform Techiyat HaMetim right there. So the Mefarshim asked, what's the connection between these three men that jumped into the furnace and the command of Hashem telling Yechezkel to go perform Techiyat HaMetim? He says, through the zechut of Mesirut Nefesh, of Kiddush Hashem, of jumping, you are now able to perform Techiyat HaMetim. Because that's what it is. Mesirut Nefesh brings about a new life. You're able to mamash revive the dead. We have 3 holidays in our calendar. We have a lot of holidays, but there are 3 major holidays. Of course, Pesach, Shavuot, and Sukkot. This is the first of the 3. And our rabbis tell us that the 3 holidays correspond to each of the 3 avot that we have. Abraham is Pesach, Lushi va'asi ugot. It was Pesach when he went to greet those angels in his tent. Shavuot is Keneged Yitzchak, because the shofar of the ayil of the ram that was put in place of Yitzchak, that was blown by Matan Torah. And of course, Sukkot is Yaakov. When Mikneu asa Sukkot, Yaakov built shelters for his sheep. The Midrash says something unbelievable. Midrash Tanchuma. The Midrash says that when Abraham got up and he saw these 3 men who were angels coming towards his tent, looking for some food and for some shelter, Pasuk says, Vayar vayarotz likratam. He saw them and he ran towards them. Let's not forget that this was right after he received the Brit Milah. The Midrash says that blood started dripping from the makom of the Brit Milah when he started running. You just had a huge surgery and you're running out and blood is dripping. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to Abraham, Chayecha, by your life, shebizchutcha ani achus al banecha bishne damim. That I am going to have mercy and pity on your children based on 2 bloods, on this blood that is coming from you. Based on another 2 bloods, I'm going to have mercy on your children. Like we quoted the pasuk, I saw that you were alive in the blood. I saw that you were alive in the blood. the blood of Milah, the blood of Dama Pesach. So Zechut of Abraham Avinu, of Yetziat Mitzrayim, was because of that Mesirut Nefesh, of getting up after he had a Brit Milah and going to serve these angels and performing Chesed and Achnasat Orchim. But I told you before that we're going to get back to Yitzchak Avinu, because also Yitzchak Avinu had what to do with this. Va'era el Abraham el Yitzchak ve'el Yaakov, the beginning of Parashat Va'era, which is the beginning of the Parasha of the plagues. The gematria of the word Va'era is the same gematria as Yitzchak. And the Mefarshim explained that Yitzchak caused the actual exodus. It was because of his zechut. What's going on over here? And the Vaydaber Elokim Moshe, the Midrash says that God also told Moshe, as a result of the Revi'it Dam, the little bit of blood that came out of Yitzchak on Har HaMoriah, on Akedat Yitzchak, so too as well Nigalu Yisrael. But there's another source. This one is not so famous. I've said it before in the drasha a few years back, but it's it's a beautiful source. How is it possible that in the zechut of Abraham and the zechut of Yitzchak, the Jewish people are going to leave? Pick one. Is it Abraham or is it Yitzchak? So the Midrash says that while the Jews were in Egypt suffering, enslaved, with backbreaking work, God had a little meeting. He called in an emergency meeting with Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. And he asked him the following question: who is willing to give a letter of their name in order that I would deduct from the years that they were supposed to be in Mitzrayim? Anybody willing to take a letter from their name and give it over? So Abraham and Yaakov both of them said, no, sorry. We need our names, okay? Our names are very special. I got my hay after that, Abraham, from Abraham, Yaakov, Israel, whatever. Our names are very good. We're not giving up our names. Until Yitzchak goes to God and says, my name is supposed to be Yitzchak, with a sin. Yud, sin, chet, kuf. If you open up Tehillim, chapter 108, I think. Or no, 108? No, 104. 104, sorry. Chapter 104, which is Hodu Hashem Kiru Bishmo, very similar to what we read every morning, the Hodu. It says, Ugurato le Yitzchak, with a sin. The sin. He says, I'm willing to give up my sin for a Sadi and change my name to a Yitzchak with a Sadi, a more stronger sound. And Hashem accepted the deal. And the value of Shin or Sin is 300. And the value of Sadi is 90. And the difference is 210. And those were the 210 years that the Jews actually stayed in Mitzrayim. So, had it only been for Abraham, they would have been released at 400 years. What they were meant to be released at, 400 years. That was the original deal. Bri Pen Abetarim was Abraham, Arba Me'ot Shana. You're going to be here 400 years. And out of your Zechut Abraham, because you got up in that tent and you were leaking blood, 400 years. They would have gone out of your Zechut. But what made them leave at 210? That was Yitzchak. Willing to give a part of himself. Mamash, a part of his name. And that's really who Yitzchak was. Like I mentioned before, offering himself on the Mizbeach. The Orach Chaim very famously writes that Yitzchak Avinu was born with a neshama of a female. And that's why he couldn't reproduce. He couldn't bear children. He needed to go through the Akedah. According to Orach Chaim, his neshama left. His female neshama left, because that was its limit at 37 years, and entered in him a male neshama. And so what do we see? From that act alone of Mesirut Nefesh, it was Techiyat HaMetim. There was a new person here that came alive. It was no longer the original Yitzchak that had a female neshama, according to Orach Chaim. It was a Yitzchak Avinu that had a male neshama that can produce the next generation of Yaakov and the future of Bnei Israel. So why were the Jewish people redeemed? Bizchut shel Yitzchak, What was Yitzchak's yesod? What was his foundation? To die al kiddush Hashem. Literally, have one soul be replaced with another soul. And that is why the haftarah that we read on Shabbat Chol HaMoed is that story of Yechezkel that I mentioned, of the dry bones that Yechezkel went and performed Techiyat HaMetim. Why am I reading about Techiyat HaMetim on Pesach? Because all of Pesach is about Mesirut Nefesh, is about giving up from your soul. Yetziat Mitzrayim is Techiyat HaMetim. It's bringing about this brand new nation, a nation that was all but dead, that the line was almost flat in the hospital room, when there had no immune system and nothing could work. But all of a sudden, with these two mitzvot, they got an infusion of blood, Dam Pesach, Dam Milah, and now they're alive again. And that's the reason. That's what makes this holiday so amazing. I'll end off with a story that I came across thanks to some. I'll be honest. It's a rabbi WhatsApp group that I'm a part of, and I was looking for just a story to kind of put this together, and we share a lot of materials. And supposedly this is a famous story, but I never heard it. The matzah in Bergen-Belsen. Bergen-Belsen, of course, was a Nazi concentration camp. And a few weeks before Pesach, I saw two versions of the story. Once it was 5 Jews, once it was 70 Jews, but I'll say the 70 Jews. The 70 Jews organized in a group, and they decided to ask the unthinkable, to go to the Nazi guards or whoever was in charge of the food rationing, that they were willing to give up their daily bread portion in exchange for flour so that they can bake matzah up for the upcoming Pesach holiday. And they did this so that they didn't want to strain the camp for food supplies. They wanted their best chance. They knew by doing this was extremely risky. They might be shot on the spot for such a request. So the name of the camp commandant was Adolf Haas Marchemo. And he read the petition. The person leading the petition was the great, the Bluzover Rebbe. He was the one leading, the Rabbi Bluzov. He was been in the camp for a few years, the tzaddik of the camp. And he says, I will forward your request to Berlin. And, sarcastically, he says, Berlin treats the Jews very, very well. And he's there twirling his revolver. And days passed, and these Jews are wondering whether they basically just signed their death sentence. You sent a request like that to Berlin, and they come back, just kill these Jews, think they are, and just kill them. And every day was coming closer to Pesach. And they realized, what did we just do? Why did we just sign this petition? All of a sudden, 2 tall SS men come in with their dogs and says, who's the rabbi? Come with us. Because the rabbi was the one that was the main signatory on the document. And at this point, the rabbi thought it was the end of his life. So much so that the Bluzover Rebbe said vidui right there in front of all of his people. He said, that's it. I'm going. When the SS guards come with dogs, I'm going to be shot in the field somewhere. So the rabbi stood in front of the commandant, and he said, like we said, Berlin is very generous with the Jews. You can bake your religious bread. Oh, it's like a total shock. Bake the religious bread. And he's called in a few other of SS guards. Tell us what you need. And they built this makeshift oven where they were going to use and bake their matzah. And the rabbis with a few other men sat there with the little flour that they accumulated over the last few days and baked really, really bad matzah, almost burnt matzah, because you don't have the proper tools and utensils. And lo and behold, on the night of the Pesach Seder, they're sitting around with a ke'ara that just had matzah. There was no maror, there was no haroset, there was no egg. It was just the people around the table. And the Bluzover Rebbe was sitting in the front of the head of the table, surrounded by a group of children and a few adults. And he began to recite the Haggadah from memory. There was no sidurim, there was no machzorim. Halach ma'anya, diachalu avatana be'arad misraim. This is the bread of affliction. He's got burnt little scraps of of matzah. And the youngest of the children asked the Man Nishtana question, as is customary. Why is this night different from all other nights? As every night we eat chametz and matzah, and tonight we only eat matzah. And it was dark. And as customary, the head of the table, or the father of the home, in this case it was the Blujever Rebbe, begins to answer the questions. But this time, he gave a different explanation than he normally does. And he says, you know that night means darkness and exile and suffering, while morning means light, hope, and redemption. Why is this night different than other nights? In other words, why is this suffering of the Shoah, of the Holocaust, different from all the other previous sufferings of the Jewish people? Everyone's looking at him. No one dare answering that question. And he says, because on all other nights we have bread and matzah. Meaning it's not always flat. But bread has some height to it. In our previous nights of exile, there was some light, there was creativity, there was moments of light. But now all we have is a flat loaf and a burnt loaf. It's dark, it's depressing. Tonight is only matzah. It's only darkness, it's only exile. And again, we can't imagine what the Jews were going through during those years of the Holocaust. But then all of a sudden he says, but you should know that the darkest point is immediately followed by the start of light. And we know that this is the beginning of our redemption. And we have to believe that this is the beginning of a redemption. He says, Avadim. Avadim stands for the word Ayin Bet Daled Yud Mem. David ben Yishai Avdecha Meshichecha, which is, we say Nishmat Kol Chai. David ben Yishai Avdecha Meshichecha. David, the son of Yishai, your servant, your Mashiach. That while you're in the status of Avadim, you have to understand there's hope, there's light. We are in the darkest moments of history. But you know that this will come to pass and we will get out of here. And the children went back to their barracks, probably never to experience another seder for those that did not survive. But there's a very interesting side note to this story. That in and of itself was incredible. But the story goes, before the seder took place, you have to ask the question, who do you give the matzah to? You only have a certain amount of matzah. And everybody's Jewish, or at least most of the prisoners are Jewish. Who do you give the matzah to? There was one lady that she found out what was going on, went to the Blujever Rebbe and says, could you please break off some matzah for my children? My children would like to have some matzah. It's before the seder. So the other people were arguing, because we can't give your children. Your children are children. They're not chayav in the mitzvah. As much as we want. You're not. We have the adults, the men and the women. They're the ones who have the mitzvah to eat matzah on the night of Pesach. We love your children, but we can't give your children. But she said, but my children are the next generation. They have to know what matzah is. They're the future of the Jewish people. And the Blujever Rebbe heard this woman's cries and broke off the matzah and gave it to her so she could give to the children. The Blujever Rebbe survived the war and married this woman who lost her family, but her children stayed alive. And later on in life, he was asked, what possessed you? Why did you marry this woman? Like, why her of all people? And he said, it was that story. Because nobody in that camp, nobody in Bergen-Belsen thought about the next minute. You didn't think about the next day. You didn't think about the next week or the next year. Survival was second to second. Everybody thought they were done and they were finished. And here, all of a sudden, is a woman who thinks she's going to survive. Here's a woman that's thinking that there's going to be a next generation. If there's a woman that has that kind of courage, if there's a woman that has such connected with the story of Pesach, so much so that she believed in her own Yetziat Mitzrayim, her own Yetziat Bergen-Belsen, then that's the woman that I want to marry. And he married that woman. He didn't have any other children, but he raised those 4 children as his own for the rest of his life. Incredible, incredible story. And that's Mesirut Nefesh. That's what it is to give of yourself. And this whole holiday, look at all I know you're thinking, the stress, the cleaning, the buying, the shopping, the food you're eating. And like, this is everything here is Mesirut Nefesh. The whole holiday is giving of yourself. Baruch Hashem, we live in a time where a lot more food is readily available. My dear father would always tell us, back in the days, it was matzah and butter. That was it. That was all you got to eat, and potatoes. There was nothing else in Morocco. That's all you had. Nowadays, you can go to the supermarket. It's still hard, but that's what it is. The mitzvot that we do, the cleaning of the house, the kosher of our utensils, the she'elot, can I have this? How do I kosher this? What do I do? How much matzah do I eat? Mesirut, I eat more matzah, more maror, kazai, chewing, bitterness. It's all there. It's one part of this grand theme of Mesirut Nefesh. If we want to see miracles, and Klal Yisrael needs to see miracles, we need to show HaKadosh Baruch Hu that we're not just acting based on teva. We're not just going day to day, just living life the way it is. Because if that's the case, Hashem will give us the way it is, the way He sees fit. We are able to produce so much more. And we do so, B'ezrat Hashem, like the Chachamim tell us, just like the miracles we saw in Mitzrayim, there's going to be a time when Mashiach comes. Arenu beniflaot, I'm going to show you even greater miracles in days when Mashiach comes. And I think Mashiach is around the corner. We need to do what we can. We need to give from ourselves. And B'ezrat Hashem, very, very soon, we'll be logging on online and buying our tickets. No matter how high those prices are, we will be buying our tickets to Yerushalayim so we can celebrate the next Pesach out there, B'ezrat Hashem. Amen. Thank you, everyone, for joining.